whole method's name might just be init, or it might be init with name. And the idea of Objective-C methods is that they're actually a little verbose in that in theory, they're supposed to read almost as phrases or sentences. So the name of the method at the third thing here is just init, and it takes no arguments, so you don't have to specify a colon or a data type or a variable name. But this one's method is actually called init with name and age. So it's kind of a funky thing, and the word is broken up. The method's name is broken up into two places. But to be clear, the name of this fourth and final method here is init with name and age. And the fact that it says and age here is just an Objective-C convention. Some of you might think this is ridiculous. You frankly get kind of used to it, and it's kind of pretty when your method calls read like sentences. But realize that this is very much a convention to construct things in this manner. Yeah?
Parentheses before the name of the method?
Correct. That's the type of the variable, the parameter age.
So what about void?
What about what?
Is void?
That's the return type.
Okay.
The return. So this is the output. This is the input. Okay. Output, or in this case, no output, hence void. And these are two inputs to this one. Okay. All right, so that's what that's going to look like, and here's how we might call them. So now consider this a fragment from an actual program. If you want to call the age getter on a student object, you quote unquote pass the age message to the student object with syntax like this. This is of course useless because I'm getting the value and I'm throwing it away. I should probably have an assignment operator up there, but again, this is just to demonstrate syntax. This is a setter, so I'm passing the set age message with an argument of 20 to the student object. That doesn't necessarily need a return value, even though it might have one. Student init, this is just initializing it. I don't know what that means. Maybe it initializes the student's name to John Harvard and some 1636 year by default or something like that. It's unclear, but it does some kind of initialization. And this is more explicit. And here too, realize you will get compiler errors early on if you forget that quote unquote is different from at quote unquote. And almost always, certainly for now, we're going to be using NS strings, not char stars. So that'll be the common case. All right, so now selectors. This is a word you'll hear, and you will even see a special keyword that is the @ selector. Selector is essentially the name of a method for now. You can think of it as that. So if you see in documentation and textbooks or the like, the notion of a selector, we're generally referring to the name of a method, such as these here. All right, so let's actually start doing something here. Let me go back to Xcode, and we'll still keep ourselves in the context of a command line application for now, just so that we don't get things cluttered with various iOS specific things. So let me go ahead and open up command line tool. I'm going to go ahead and call this students1. I'm going to leave foundation selected. Company identifier is the same. Doesn't really matter what it is. And I'm going to use automatic reference counting. So let me go ahead and click next. Sure, I'll leave a Git repo selected. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And now I have the same exact template that I started with before. So what do we want to do here? So let's go into, first, files that we don't need. I'm going to delete the man page, just so that we're not distracted by stuff we don't need to care about. I'm going to go into main.m. I'm going to close the right-hand side and recall that this is the boilerplate code, the sample code that I'm given initially. So let's go ahead first, though, and define the notion of a student. I'm going to go up to the project. I'm going to say new file. And you can also get to this from the file menu, as in most IDEs. And notice that I have a few choices here. And then early on, almost all the code you write will be iOS. Almost all the code I'll write today is macOS only. So I'm going to jump down to macOS here, just to keep things simple. And I'm going to choose Objective-C class. And I'm going to click Next. I'm going to give the class a name of student. Notice it's asking me, what do you want it to be a subclass of? Fine, NS object. That's the most generic parent to have. Now it's just asking me where I want to save it. I want to save it inside of my student's project. So let me go ahead and click OK. And all this did here for me is create these two files for me, student.h and student.m, just with some sample comments really and very little more. So let's go over to the header file, the .h file, and notice it did give me a little more than comments. It gave me an import, which is useful to have. It gave me the equivalent of a class declaration here. And so now I need to decide what do I want to associate with a student in terms of instance variables. Well, for now, I'm going to go ahead and say that everything should be public. Just we're going to do this sort of version 1 style and improve it thereafter. Then I'm going to to give the student an age. I won't bother with year just yet. NS string. And notice, as with most IDEs, you get nice little autocomplete, which frankly can help you learn the language. And then name, star name. So this is now my class. I'm not going to bother having any methods just yet. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the white space. That's it. So this is pretty comparable to what we did at the very start of today with PHP, but we're using age now instead of year, just so we have a smaller number. And then this way you can play along at home with the sample code online. All right, well, let's go into now the M file. And the M file by default looks like this. Notice this line is important. Just like in C, if you have a header file you wrote, you'd better include or import it. And then as for the implementation, we're going to keep it super simple. Just like PHP initially, no methods. So that's it. Not a good implementation of a student, but at least it is a version 1. So now let's go over to main.m and notice that I again get this kind of skeletal code here. The auto release pool symbol for now is important just to keep. We'll tease apart eventually what it's actually doing, but again it has to do with memory management. So what do I want to do? Well, let's go ahead and create an object called Alice here. So student star Alice gets, how do I, without looking at the online code, how do I instantiate an object of type student? Yeah, I'm back.
Is it the braces?
Oh, yeah, it's pretty close. Yeah. Okay, good.
So these would be the object type. So was it NS object?
Sorry, speak a little louder.
NS object that was the type, or
Oh, so we want a student object, though.
okay.
So what's the class in question? So as simple as student, yep.
What's the method?
So we want to allocate the student. So we need alloc, right? So recall that alloc is a class method, the plus sign, recall from the earlier slides, which just means you get this, you can call this before an object is instantiated. And that's perfect. Otherwise, we'd have a catch-22. You can't call a method on an object that's not been instantiated unless it's been instantiated already. So here we have alloc, which is a class method. So this is how we effectively malloc a student object. Now, wait a minute. In my .m file, in my student.m file, I had no methods deliberately a few minutes ago. How is there this alloc method in the first place then? Yeah. Perfect. It came from NSObject. So the value for us thus far of this, inheriting from NSObject is that we get a few things for free, among which is the alloc method. So we can at least minimally allocate objects of any type, in this case student. So recall from PHP also, when you extend a class, as we did in PHP with the extends keyword, or in Objective-C with the colon symbol, you inherit all of the methods of the parent class, depending on visibility. So alloc is one of the class methods we then get access to. All right, so what's it yelling at me about? Well, I've already made a mistake, simple as this code is. It's not liking this S, it's not liking this A, so let's click on this symbol here. The red line then shows me the results of precompiling this with this error message. Use of undeclared identifier Alice. So this is one of those things, the same message would be pretty much the same in C. It's actually misleading. Surely the thing doesn't know who Alice is, but it's actually confused by what? What's the error? Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I think that it's trying to say like you don't have a variable that's Alice, but you're just instantiating the variable, so it's the first instance of Alice.
Okay, so it's true that this is the first instance of Alice, but the explanation is actually a little simpler. I think I heard it's student. So when in doubt, if it looks like ALICE, that actually looks perfectly fine. It's a variable. It shouldn't have existed before then. Look to the left of it, and typically that's where your error is. And so, you know, what keyword might the compiler not yet know about student? Well, that's because I screwed up. I didn't do up here import, quote unquote, student.h. And recall from C, angled braces means default standard libraries that come with the system, quote unquote, are files that you yourself wrote. So let me go ahead now and save. What's it? Oh, okay. So now it's yelling at me for a different reason. Phew. That's okay. Unused variable Alice. That's okay. I only wrote one line of code. But now the red error is gone. This is just a warning. All right, good. Now we're on our way. So what do I want to do next? So let me go ahead and just like in C, let me give Alice an age of, let's say, 20, which has got to be an int. Let me go ahead and give Alice a name of quote unquote Alice, but I already made a mistake. Go ahead, say it again. The @ sign, right? So recall that in student.h, I have a name property, or name field, called name, but it's of type NSString star, which means down here I'd better assign it at, quote unquote, and sure enough, if I click on the little error message here, incompatible pointer types, assigning NSString from char6. So char6, it's an array, char star effectively. So this is the compiler trying to explain as much to me too. So now I've put the @ sign there and save. Sometimes Xcode's a little slow on the uptake, so just save it and maybe wait a second, and then hopefully the error message should disappear if indeed you've corrected it properly. All right, let's do Bob in the same way. So student Bob gets student alloc. This is going to give me another instance of a student object.